The Money Trust: How a Banking Cartel Captured America. The Heist, 1907 to 1913. Iupater Nostrum, Feudalism Invisibilem Foveat. In the spring of 1848, Europe caught fire. From Paris to Vienna, Berlin to Frankfurt, crowds filled the squares. They demanded constitutions, free speech, and an end to the old aristocratic order. For Jewish families living in the German Confederation's patchwork of duchies and principalities, the stakes were personal. They demanded full civil rights, the freedom to live, work, and worship without the centuries-old restrictions that had confined them to cramped ghettos and narrow trails. Over the next decade, more than 1 million Germans crossed the Atlantic. Among them were young men who would become the founding fathers of American finance. In 1888, Germany experienced its own political earthquake. On June 15th, 29-year-old Wilhelm II ascended the throne. The new Kaiser was brilliant, insecure, and deeply resentful. Within 2 years, he forced Chancellor Otto von Bismarck into retirement and abandoned the careful diplomacy that had kept European peace for 2 decades. In the 1890s and early 1900s, the next generation of migrations began. The German bankers who fled the failed revolutions of 1848 built Wall Street. They financed the Union during the Civil War, the transcontinental railroads, and the rise of American industry. They married one another's children, held one another's partnership shares, and corresponded across the Atlantic in German and English. Prologue: The Phone Call. On the morning of October 22, 1907, the National Bank of Commerce made a phone call. They told the Knickerbocker Trust Company, "We will no longer clear your checks. 17,000 depositors, $35 million in deposits, about $1 billion today." With one phone call, the Knickerbocker Trust was dead. Who made that call? No one would ever say. But J.P. Morgan's own son-in-law wondered aloud. Who dared? The perpetrator was so powerful, it feared no retaliation. The answer was the network. By the network, this series means a specific group of families and financial institutions that dominated American finance from the 1890s through today. The core families are Morgan, Rockefeller, Warburg, Schiff, and Harriman. The core institutions are J.P. Morgan and Company, Kuhn, Loeb and Company, National City Bank, and First National Bank. Before we go further, let me give you a key to the numbers you will hear. $1 in 1907 was worth about 30 of today's dollars. $1 in 1933 was worth about 20 of today's dollars. $1 in 1944 was worth about 15 of today's dollars. A good rule of thumb: any figure before 1933, multiply by 25. Any figure from 1933 to 1971, multiply by 15. Any figure after 1971, multiply by 5. These are rough, but they give you the scale. The king is gone. The lords remain. The Federal Reserve is the castle. The member banks are the barons. The rest of us are the serfs. This is Episode 1, The Heist. Chapter 1, The Inciting Incident. It began with a German immigrant's son who refused to bow to Standard Oil. F. Augustus Fritz Heinze, the Copper King of Butte, Montana, stood at the height of his power in 1907. He had spent nearly 2 decades fighting the Standard Oil monopoly. To understand how he fought, you need to know about the law of the apex. Under mining law, if a vein of ore came to the surface on your land, you had the right to follow that vein underground, even if it ran beneath your neighbor's property.
That land has been had. Nothing you can do about it. It's gone. It's had.
Heinze used this law to follow copper veins onto Standard Oil's land. He was legally stealing their ore. Standard Oil could not stop him. In 1906, Standard Oil gave up. They bought Heinze's mines for $12 million, about $360 million today. But Heinze did not retire. He used that cash to buy up stock in Standard Oil's own parent company, threatening a hostile takeover. This was an act of war.
I rob banks for a living. What do you do?
Fritz Heinze had a reputation. He was a hard-drinking brawler who once punched a cab driver for overcharging him. He reduced minor work days to 8 hours and became a folk hero in Montana. The most scandalous episode of his life involved a pretty girl who allegedly offered a Montana judge $100,000 to rule in Heinze's favor. He was implicated but never charged. He died in 1914 at age 44 from cirrhosis of the liver, his fortune gone. Standard Oil hated him. J.P. Morgan hated him. The entire Wall Street establishment hated him. Jacob Schiff had warned months earlier, unless we have a central bank with adequate control of credit resources, this country is going to undergo the most severe and far-reaching money panic in its history. In October 1907, they destroyed him. Fritz's older brother, Otto Heinze, was the family's Wall Street strategist. Born in Brooklyn, educated in Leipzig, he ran the family brokerage from the shadows. He conceived a classic short squeeze on United Copper stock. Let me explain what a short squeeze is. When investors bet that a stock price will fall, they short sell it. They borrow shares, sell them, and hope to buy them back later at a lower price. If the price goes up instead, they lose money. A short squeeze happens when someone buys up all available shares, forcing the short sellers to buy from them at inflated prices. Otto believed short sellers had borrowed more shares than existed. He planned to buy up the remaining shares, drive up the price, and force the short sellers to pay him whatever he asked. Otto believed he had cracked the code. He was wrong. What Otto did not know, what he could not know, was that the original investors who had sold the company its mines were sitting on thousands of shares. They were not in any count because they were not active traders. They just held their certificates. When the stock ticker started printing $52, they picked up their phones. "Sell," they said. "Sell it all." Otto was not fighting the short sellers. He was fighting every shareholder in America. When the scheme collapsed, United Copper plummeted from $52 to $10 in 2 days. Otto refused to take delivery of the stock his brokers had purchased for him. The brokerage firm, Gross & Kleberg, went bankrupt. Otto Heinze and Company was suspended from the stock exchange. Otto spent the next 6 years settling his tangled affairs. He faced an involuntary bankruptcy petition in 1909 that was dismissed, but by 1913 he filed for voluntary bankruptcy. He died in 1948, survived only by a granddaughter. But here is where the official narrative ends and the conspiracy begins. Chapter 2: The Clearinghouse as a Weapon. To understand how the network destroyed Heinze, you need to understand the New York Clearinghouse. The Pujo Committee report of 1913 described clearinghouse associations in detail. It noted that there were 242 such associations in the United States, but the New York Association was the most powerful. The report stated that the New York Clearinghouse Association was an unincorporated voluntary organization on the same legal footing as private clubs, and as such, subject only to the authority of its own governing body. The report identified specific problems. First, the association had a minimum capital requirement of $1 million for membership. excluding smaller, solvent banks. Banks that did not meet this requirement had to clear through a member bank as their agent. This agency relationship could be summarily terminated by the member bank, either on its own or at the direction of the clearinghouse committee. The report noted that in the panic of 1907, the Knickerbocker Trust Company's clearing agent, the National Bank of Commerce, had terminated the relationship, and the trust failed immediately after. The report documented a second case. Two Brooklyn banks, the Brooklyn Bank and the Borough Bank, cleared through the Oriental Bank, a full member of the New York Clearinghouse. The Clearinghouse Committee ordered the Oriental Bank to terminate its clearing relationship with both banks. The president of the Oriental Bank protested, saying it would destroy the banks and would mean trouble for us. The committee ordered him to do it anyway. He complied. Within a day or two, both Brooklyn banks closed. The report concluded that the clearinghouse exercised dangerous power for some members to possess over others. It recommended that clearinghouse associations be incorporated and regulated by the federal government. Congress did nothing. The New York Clearinghouse remained an unincorporated private club. When you write a check, the money does not move instantly. Your bank owes money to the recipient's bank. At the end of each day, banks settle these debts with each other. The clearinghouse was the private system that managed this settlement. It was founded in 1853. By 1907, it was controlled by the same banking network that Heinze had challenged. The network used two tactics against Heinze's allies. First, the silent run. Here is how it works. A group of depositors write checks on a target bank and deposit them in other banks. Those banks present the checks to the clearinghouse for settlement. The target bank's clearing balance drains rapidly. No public panic. No newspaper headlines. Just a slow, invisible death. Only the clearinghouse sees it happening. Financial journalist Alexander Noyes testified that the Knickerbocker Trust experienced a silent run days before the public run broke it. The clearinghouse members were aware but did nothing. Second, the refusal to clear. When the National Bank of Commerce announced it would no longer clear Knickerbocker Trust checks, that was the fatal blow. The clearinghouse had effectively declared the trust insolvent. Depositors panicked. But the panic was not spontaneous. It was manufactured. The Pujo report confirmed that the refusal to clear was the direct cause of the Knickerbocker Trust's failure. It quoted the chairman of the Clearinghouse Committee as admitting that it would have been a safeguard to the public had the Knickerbocker Trust Company been a member of the association and not dependent upon the will of a single bank for clearing privileges. Even Morgan's own son-in-law, H.L. Satterley, questioned who had dared to run on the Knickerbocker Trust despite the risk of retaliation. His implication was clear. The perpetrator was too powerful to fear retaliation. So here is what the network achieved in 1 week. First, they eliminated a competitor. Heinze was ruined. His banks were seized. His brokerage was suspended. The Copper King, who defied Standard Oil, was finished. Second, they weakened the trust company threat. Trust companies were lightly regulated competitors to traditional banks. They had funded Heinze's speculation. By destroying the Knickerbocker Trust and allowing it to fail while saving other institutions, Morgan and his allies eliminated a rival form of finance. In 1 week, the network crossed 2 names off its list. The network did not steal the money supply. They were given it, and the American people were told it was reform. Chapter 3. The Pujo Investigation. In 1912, Congressman Arsène Pujo of Louisiana launched the first congressional investigation into what the committee called the Money Trust. Committee counsel Samuel Untermeyer defined it in the official report: an established and well-defined identity and community of interest between a few leaders of finance, held together through stock holdings, interlocking directorates, and other forms of domination, resulting in a vast and growing concentration of money and credit in the hands of a comparatively few men. The report identified the inner group as J.P. Morgan and Company, First National Bank of New York, National City Bank of New York, Lee, Higginson and Company, Kidder, Peabody and Company, and Kuhn, Loeb and Company. It identified closely allied institutions including the Bankers Trust Company, Guarantee Trust Company, Chase National Bank, and the National Bank of Commerce. It identified Chicago Associates, the First National Bank of Chicago, and the Illinois Trust and Savings Bank of Chicago. The report named specific individuals as the ruling spirits of these institutions. J.P. Morgan was the ruling spirit of J.P. Morgan and Company. George F. Baker was the ruling spirit of the First National Bank. James Stillman was the ruling spirit of the National City Bank. Jacob H. Schiff was a senior partner at Kuhn, Loeb and Company, along with Otto H. Kahn, Felix M. Warburg, and Isaac N. Seligman. The report documented the extensive affiliations of J.P. Morgan and Company with financial corporations, the Bankers Trust Company, Guarantee Trust Company, Astor Trust Company, National Bank of Commerce, Liberty National Bank, Chemical National Bank, and the Equitable Life Assurance Society. It documented Morgan's affiliations with transportation systems, the New York Central Lines, New York, New Haven and Hartford Railroad, Northern Pacific Railway, Southern Railway, Reading Company, Erie Railroad, Lehigh Valley Railroad, and others. It documented Morgan's affiliations with industrial corporations, United States Steel Corporation, International Harvester Company, General Electric Company, Pullman Company, American Can Company, National Biscuit Company, and United States Rubber Company. It documented Morgan's affiliations with public utility corporations, American Telephone and Telegraph Company, Western Union Telegraph Company, Consolidated Gas Company, and the Interborough Rapid Transit Company. The report documented the affiliations of the First National Bank with the same network of financial, transportation, industrial, and utility corporations, including the Chase National Bank, Bankers Trust Company, Guarantee Trust Company, Mutual Life Insurance Company, and the Anthracite coal-carrying railroads. The report documented the affiliations of the National City Bank with the National City Company, Farmers Loan and Trust Company, New York Trust Company, Riggs National Bank of Washington, D.C., and major railroad systems including the Southern Pacific Company and Union Pacific Railroad. The report found that J.P. Morgan and Company, the First National Bank, and the National City Bank had acquired joint control of the Equitable Life Assurance Society, the National Bank of Commerce, and many of the largest railroad and industrial corporations. It found that they acted in unison and cooperation in purchasing and underwriting security issues. The report included a table of their joint transactions showing that since 1905 they had participated together in underwriting syndicates totaling billions of dollars. The report also documented a rule of banking ethics that explicitly forbade members of the inner group from competing with each other for security underwriting business. The report stated, "The result is suppression of competition in the supplying of capital," and further, suppression of such competition further secured by a rule of banking ethics. The report quantified the combined power of the inner group. First, as regards banking resources, the group controlled an estimated $1.2 billion in deposits across just a handful of institutions. Second, as regards the greater transportation systems, they dominated the nation's railroads. Third, as regards the greater producing and trading corporations, they controlled the largest industrial companies. Fourth, as regards the greater public utility corporations, they dominated telephone, telegraph, and gas utilities. Most significantly for our story, the report explicitly warned that currency reform, what became the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, would further consolidate the network's control of money and credit. The report's final chapter included a section titled Currency Reform and Concentration of Control of Money and Credit. It argued that unless accompanied by antitrust measures, a central bank would give the inner group even more power. This prediction proved accurate. J.P. Morgan was not a man who asked for permission. He gave orders. He suffered from rhinophyma, a bulbous purple nose, not from alcoholism but an inherited condition. He was known to have several female consorts throughout his life. He had tickets to sail on the Titanic's maiden voyage in 1912, but canceled at the last minute, a fact that still fuels conspiracy theories. He died in Rome on March 31st, 1913, 4 months after the Pujo report was issued. He spent the modern equivalent of $900 million on art in the last 2 decades of his life. The gemstone Morganite is named after him. The first thing in credit is character. Before money or anything else, money cannot buy it. A man I do not trust could not get money from me on all the bonds in Christendom. James Stillman forged alliances with the Rockefellers through marriage. His daughter married William Goodsell Rockefeller. Another daughter married Percy Avery Rockefeller. After his death in 1918, a bizarre chain occurred. James Gordon Bennett died, appointing Stillman as administrator. Stillman died weeks later. Stillman appointed John William Sterling as executor. Sterling died suddenly. Sterling appointed James O. Bloss as executor. Bloss died. The combined estates totaled $76 million. George F. Baker, the ruling spirit of the First National Bank, was described in the report as a man of few words and immense power. He rarely testified publicly. When he did, his answers were terse. He was a director of more than 20 major corporations. He sat on the board of the Mutual Life Insurance Company alongside J.P. Morgan. He was a close associate of Morgan's for decades. The Pujo Committee found that just 11 financial firms had participated in joint transactions totaling $3.6 billion. An astronomical sum at the time. Color-coded charts showed that Morgan, First National and National City held 12 directorships in United States Steel alone. One rare piece of evidence emerged from the hearings. Treasury Secretary George Cartel testified about the $25 million in federal deposits distributed during the 1907 panic. When asked which banks received the money, he refused to answer, stating his memory was poor and directing investigators to Treasury records. The Atlanta Semi-Weekly Journal reported that Cartel refuses to be bully-ragged. The Pujo Committee recommended regulation. Congress did nothing. The money trust remained intact. Chapter 4: The Heist. But 2 years before the Pujo investigation, a secret meeting had already sealed the deal. Let us go back to November 1910. In November 1910, a group of the world's most powerful men boarded a private railroad car in New Jersey. They traveled under assumed names. They addressed each other by first names only. Their destination, Jekyll Island, Georgia, an exclusive resort owned by J.P. Morgan. They told the club staff they were duck hunters. They brought no ducks. They brought no guns. They brought one thing: a 7-page blueprint for a central bank. The group included Senator Nelson Aldrich of Rhode Island, the political mastermind. Aldrich was called the General Manager of the United States by the London Times and a disgusting hypocrite by the New York Times. His daughter Abby married John D. Rockefeller, Jr. His son, Nelson Aldrich Rockefeller, became Vice President of the United States. The group included Paul Warburg of Kuhn, Loeb and Company, the technical architect. The Pujo report confirms Paul Warburg's position as a partner at Kuhn, Loeb and Company, placing him directly inside the money trust structure. Warburg was a shy, sensitive man described as the mildest-mannered man that ever personally conducted a revolution. He was a naturalized German citizen who had been decorated by Kaiser Wilhelm II before the war, a fact that made him a target of suspicion during World War I. The cartoon character, Oliver "Daddy" Warbucks, from Little Orphan Annie, was purportedly inspired by his name. The group also included Frank Vanderlip of National City Bank, Henry Davison of J.P. Morgan and Company, Benjamin Strong of Morgan's Bankers Trust Company, and A. Piatt Andrew of the Treasury. The Pujo report identifies Henry P. Davison as a partner at J.P. Morgan and Company, a voting trustee of the Bankers Trust Company and Guarantee Trust Company, and a director of numerous Morgan-controlled corporations. It identifies Benjamin Strong, Jr., as a voting trustee of the Bankers Trust Company. Strong would later become the first governor of the New York Federal Reserve Bank. For 1 week, they drafted the Aldrich Plan, a proposal for a National Reserve Association with 15 branches across the country, a single central bank designed to hold member bank reserves and issue an elastic currency. Then they burned their notes, swore each other to secrecy, and returned to New York. For 20 years, they denied the meeting ever happened. I do not feel it is any exaggeration to speak of our secret expedition to Jekyll Island as the occasion of the actual conception of what eventually became the Federal Reserve System. We were told to leave our last names behind us. We addressed one another as Ben, Paul, Nelson, Abe. When the plan went to Congress in 1912, it was politically dead. Democrats had campaigned against the money trust, but the technical details survived. President Woodrow Wilson needed expertise. Paul Warburg became the indispensable consultant. The Pujo report had warned explicitly about this outcome. In its final chapter, the report stated that, unless accompanied by antitrust measures, currency reform would further consolidate the network's control. The report concluded, "The result is suppression of competition in the supplying of capital." The Federal Reserve Act of 1913 contained Warburg's provisions virtually unaltered. Wilson appointed Warburg to the first Federal Reserve Board in 1914, overcoming opposition to a German-born appointee. When asked who deserved credit for the Fed's creation, Warburg quipped that given how many claimed paternity, its mother must have been a most immoral woman. Before passage of this act, the New York bankers could only dominate the reserves of New York. Now we are able to dominate the bank reserves of the entire country. The Pujo Committee's warning was ignored. The network pulled off the greatest heist in American history, convincing the public that a private central bank was a public institution. Chapter 5. The 16th Amendment. The other half of the heist. Now we come to a piece of the story that is almost never told. The Federal Reserve Act was signed on December 23, 1913. But the 16th Amendment, the amendment that allowed the federal government to collect income tax, was ratified on February 3, 1913. They occurred in the same calendar year. This was not an accident. Here is what happened. In 1895, the Supreme Court ruled in Pollock versus Farmers Loan and Trust that the federal income tax was unconstitutional. The government could not tax incomes directly. It had to rely on tariffs and excise taxes. This was a problem for the network. Why? Because the network wanted a central bank, and a central bank needed government bonds, and government bonds needed a reliable source of revenue to pay the interest. In 1909, the same year that Senator Aldrich began his push for currency reform, Congress proposed the 16th Amendment. It would allow a federal income tax without apportionment among the states. The amendment was sent to the states for ratification. Meanwhile, the network was planning Jekyll Island. The secret meeting happened in November 1910. The Aldrich Plan was drafted. The network's blueprint for a central bank was complete. On February 3, 1913, the 16th Amendment was ratified. The income tax was now constitutional. On December 23, 1913, the Federal Reserve Act was signed. The central bank was now law. The connection. The same people who wanted a central bank also wanted a federal income tax. Why? Because the income tax would create a steady, predictable stream of revenue. That revenue would be used to pay interest on government bonds. Those bonds would be held by the Federal Reserve and the network's banks. The network would earn risk-free interest. The taxpayer would foot the bill. In feudalism, the lord collected tithes and taxes. In modern finance, the network collects interest, fees, and seigniorage. The 16th Amendment ensured that the federal government would have a reliable source of revenue. The Federal Reserve ensured that the government could borrow money and that the network's banks would be the ones lending it. The two pieces fit together like a lock and key. Without the income tax, the government would struggle to pay interest on its debt. Without the Federal Reserve, the network would have no guaranteed market for government bonds. Together, they created a self-reinforcing system. The government borrows, the Fed buys the bonds, or facilitates their sale to member banks, and the income tax pays the interest. The network did not steal the money supply. They were given it, and the American people were told it was reform.
Proelium silentis fruor, cicatrix in anima